Recording in progress.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and you're welcome to today's webinar on achieving compliance in the cloud. My name is Nanekia, and I'm an assistant manager within the risk advisory practice. On today's webinar, we'll be talking about Cloud Security Alliance's Cloud Control Matrix version 4 framework to help us understand the controls that we can implement to ensure compliance and secure our cloud environment. Just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. The webinar is being recorded and it will be uploaded onto the Deloitte Ghana YouTube page. For the avoidance of distractions, we've muted all microphones of participants. You can, however, raise your hands during the question and answer session, and you'll be unmuted so you can ask your questions. We invite your comments and your questions. Please refer to the Q&A chat box on your screen. If you think of any question within the webinar, you can type it in there and then I'll pose it to any of our speakers or hold it for the discussion session towards the end of the webinar. A link to a survey will also be put in the chat box for you to provide us with your feedback getting towards the end of the webinar. This is to help us improve upon our events in the future. At this point, I would hand over to the leader of the risk advisory practice in Ghana, Kofi Iwa, to give us a welcome address.
Thank you, Nanekia, and a very good morning to you all participants on today's webinar. I'm really excited to have you on today's call. As Nanekia rightly said, the conversation this morning is going to be looking at the Cloud Compliance Metrics version 4. And it is important for us all on the call to bring out the most relevant information around what is expected of us as key stakeholders to enable us secure our most valuable assets within the organization. Gone were the days where people within organizations would rather want to manage their services internally, taking care of their data centers and all those, which then definitely cost more. Currently, what we get to see is that there are a lot of data service providers that are providing us with various services, that platform as a service, software as a service, infrastructure as a service, and all these services pose certain level of risk in our business. And so it is important for us as businesses to understand what is expected of them and what is even expected of us individually and as a collective in order to manage the risk and safeguard our assets. Without going into the technical side discussing the meat of today's conversation, I would like to urge you all that one thing or two things that I will expect of you is to come with very open mind, to listen to the panelists as they take us through these conversations. They've made it very simple for us to understand. So even if you are not a technical security person and you are an executive of organization present on the call, it gives you an idea of what is critical and what you need to know. More so, we also expect from you that at the end of the presentation, during the question and answer, we want you to also challenge the team, ask critical questions, and also share your thoughts in order for us to ensure that the compliance level is achieved. So without wasting much of your time, I want to welcome you again, and I wish that you all will enjoy today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Kofi, for the welcome address. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our speakers for today's webinar. First of all, we have Edith Mo, who is a senior manager within our risk advisory practice. She's a certified information systems auditor with 16 years of experience in IT and specialized assurance services across various industries. She's also been involved in IT auditing, post-implementation reviews, cloud security assessments and auditing, IT infrastructure assessments, IT governance, business continuity and information security readiness assessments for ISO certifications as well as implementations. She also holds a master's degree in information systems. Our second speaker for today is in the person of Felix Yagi, who is a senior consultant within the risk advisory practice. He is a cloud security expert with more than 5 years of industry experience, spanning across cloud computing, data center, and network operations, as well as security services. He has an in-depth knowledge on IT infrastructure management, cloud computing, and computer network. His areas of expertise include cloud security, designing cloud architectures, cloud architecture audit, automation, data center operations, computer networking, computer networking and systems operations. And he also holds 2 AWS certifications, which are the certified cloud practitioner and then the certified solutions architect. He's also a certified information systems auditor. So at this point, I'll hand over to Edith to start with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nanikia, for the introduction. We are going to go through cloud computing, what it means, the benefits of having the cloud, and we will also go through the shared responsibility for the cloud, as well as the cloud control metrics, and then the difference between the version 3 and the version 4, and then deep dive into some of the domains. Then we'll go into our question and answer session. Now, what is cloud computing? We are going back to basics. So cloud computing is the practice of using a network of remote servers hosted on the internet to store, manage, and process data rather than on a local server or your local PC. There are 3 options in determining which cloud computing model that one wants to deploy based on your organization's business strategy. They are Platform as a Service, or PaaS or PaaS for short, Software as a Service, or SaaS or SaaS for short, Infrastructure as a Service, or IaaS for short. Over the last 10 years, many organizations across both the public and private sectors have embarked on their journey to the cloud. While commercial organizations have been relatively quick to embrace the rapid flexibility provided by cloud computing, the public sector has seen a slower progress in this effect. Now let's go into some of the benefits we can get from cloud computing. There are a number of benefits that we can get while deploying cloud computing. Some of them are your backup and restore of the data. Your data is available. The third party always backs up. You are able to pick up data and restore as and when you need it. You are able to access your data anywhere with any device. You have the ability to get rid of most or all of your hardware or software, depending on the particular option of cloud that you have deployed. You have a centralized data security that you are assured of. The third party ensures that it puts in place the NINA security. And then also as a benefit, you can also get some business insights from them, being a SOC 1 report, a SOC 2 report, a SOC 2 plus report, even a SOC 3 report. That shows that, yes, there are controls within the cloud environment, and they have been designed, they have been implemented, and they are also operating effectively, giving you the necessary comfort that you need. And then also, most of all, it is reliable. You can get it anywhere as and when you need it. Now, looking at cloud shared responsibility, how do we sort of annotate it to our daily life so that it sticks with us? How are we going to ensure that you can easily compare cloud computing models to our daily life? So we looked at it in the essence of you getting a house, you building a house. Usually there are options for you to get a house. You either build a house by yourself, so you have your land, you build it. You can either rent your house, you can rent a furnished house, or better still, if you want to live the life out, as I would say, you'd go and stay in a hotel. So building a house is akin to what we call the on-prem or on the premises data center, where you have to put in your physical infrastructure, you have to put in your application platform, and then you also have to put in your software applications. These are going to be managed by yourself. So the risk lies with you and is managed by you. Now, to rent a house, we annotate that to infrastructure as a service. So the shell is given to you, the infrastructure is given to you for you to build upon it. So you now come in and build in your application platform and then your software platform. So definitely it means that you are putting in your furnishings and then you're also putting in the necessary amenities that you need for your day-to-day life. Then we have rent a furnished apartment or rent a furnished house. In this is a platform as a service where the service provider gives you the infrastructure and also the application platform. So all you need is to come in with, deploy your software applications on it, and then you are good to go. Or where you outsource everything, that is, you outsource your infrastructure, your application platform, and your software applications, and only manage your data yourself. So the third party service provider would manage everything for you, and then you only manage your data. So just as a follow-up on it, we are going to look at how the responsibility is shared across the three options that we have to deploy for the cloud. So as we mentioned, if you are using your on the premises or fully on-prem, you are responsible for all the data. You are responsible for your network, both physical and virtual servers. You are responsible for your operating systems, your database, your applications, and your data. But with infrastructure as a service, now the service provider is meeting you halfway, where they would provide the data center for you, they would provide the network for you, they would provide the physical and the virtual service for you, whilst you as the client will take care of your operating system, your databases, your applications, and your data. With platform as a service, you only have to take care of your data and your applications. The databases, the OS, the physical and virtual servers, the network and the data center are managed by the third party. Whilst on the last option, which is the software as a service platform, all you need to do is manage your data, and then the rest of the responsibility lies with the third party. Now, let's dive into the cloud control matrix. Let's look at how it came about. Now, the cloud control matrix came about as a result of a research that was driven by cloud customers, service providers, as well as professionals, the professionals, assurance professionals on cloud. So they sat together and did a research, and then the framework came into being. Now, the CCM, or the Cloud Control Matrix, specifically is designed to provide a fundamental security principle to guide both cloud vendors and then assist prospective cloud customers in assessing the overall security risks of the cloud service provider. The latest version, that is the CCM version 4, seeks to raise the cloud security bar to the next level. How is it doing this? So it's doing this by ensuring that it reflects the changes, the rampant changes that have come in the market, the new technology changes that have come through. It has improved a new feature. So we realize when you compare version 3 with version 4, version 4 has more domains and then also more controls. There are some domains within version 3 that has been left out or merged together in the version 4. So as I mentioned, for the version 4, they have 133, version 3 had 133 controls with 16 domains, and version 4 now has 197 controls with 17 domains. So there are 6 new domains in version 4, and then 4 of the version 3 domains were retired. Now, let's look at some of the new domains that have been put into place. The first domain that has been put into place is the login and monitoring domain. This is a new domain that has been introduced in version 4, and it has 13 controls. Then the cryptography, encryption, and key management domain in version 4 now has 21 controls. As known before, in version 3, it only had 4 controls. The Data Security and Privacy Lifestyle Management, the DSP in version 4, now has 19 controls, whilst in the version 3, it was known as Data Security and Information Lifecycle Management, and that had 7 controls. Governance, Risk and Compliance in version 4 now has 8 controls, and it was known as Governance and Risk Management Controls in the version 3, and that had 11 controls. The Universal Endpoint Management in version 4 now has 14 controls, and it was known in version 3 as Mobile Security with 20 controls. Audit and Assurance in version 4 now has 6 controls, whilst in the old version 3, it was known as Audit, Assurance and Compliance with 3 controls. Now let's look at the objectives of the CCM version 4. The objectives of the CCM version 4 is to ensure coverage of requirements from the new cloud technology. So as I mentioned, new and emerging technologies have come through, and they want to ensure that they include all these emerging technologies in these, so that it's easy for us to be able to assess our controls within the cloud environment. So as I mentioned earlier, four domains were retired from version 3, and then 6 domains have been input into version 4. Now in version 4, they've improved the auditing controls within them. So now there's auditing consistency. The wording is there. They've put in a glossary for you to be able to confirm what it actually means. So there's some sort of consistency within the auditing controls. And it's the same for the implementation controls as well. There's some consistency in there. And there's the guidance actually shows you exactly what to do from end to end, who is responsible for what particular process. Then the 5th is the improved control clarity. So like I mentioned, the terms are there, the consistent terms and the wording are there. There's a glossary of definitions and terms. You can quickly look at it. And most importantly, it's improved with interoperability and compatibility with other standards like the PCI DSS, ISO 27001, NIST, and COBIT, amongst others. We look at the domains in the next slide. So as we mentioned, the domains are 17 in all, with 197 controls. Now for each, as you look on your screen, you will see that, for example, for audit and assurance, as I mentioned earlier, there are 6 controls within there. For application and interface security, there are 7 controls. For business continuity management, there are 11. It runs through to universal endpoint, which has 14, supply chain management, which has 14, and then identity and access management, which has 16 controls in all. So at this point, I think we would dive deeper into the controls, pick some of the key ones that we want to look at and discuss, and then we can have the questions and answers after this session. So I will hand over to my colleague Felix, who will deep dive into the actual controls for the selected domains. Thank you. Over to you, Felix.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Edith, for the introduction. So we are going to dive deeper into the CSA CCM version 4. Now, this is a document. It comes in an Excel document, which is password protected. As such, you would not be able to make any modifications or edits to the document. And then the document actually touches on areas on control ID and then the title. So each control has an ID and a title. And then we also look at control specification. Now, an interesting aspect that has been added to this matrix is the light status. So the CCM light status is basically a cost. The CCM lights is actually a cost-effective solution designed for adoption by low-risk profile cloud organizations or organizations with limited IT resources. Example are small and medium-scale enterprises. As Edith mentioned earlier, there are 197 controls in this version. And then for organizations or very small organizations with very limited IT resources, not all of them will apply. So in version 4, the light status has been included to be able to trim down the number of controls. That's these small and then medium scale enterprises adopting the cloud can adhere to and use that to achieve compliance in the cloud. So, there are 91 controls under the light status. So depending on your use case. And then for each domain category, there is always a policy level control. So hello, please, can you confirm if you can see the slide?
Felix, please, you can proceed.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so as I was saying, for each domain category, it always starts with a policy level control, which speaks to policies that has to be implemented, established, and then developed for each of the control domains. Now, it also follows up with procedures and then technical measures to be implemented. Now, this framework is tailored for all cloud providers. So it can come in handy for users who have multi-cloud environments. And then it is also worth noting that these controls are guidelines, so you can tweak them to align to your use case. Now, at this stage, we will continue by zooming in into the domain. And then the first domain that we will look at is the application and then interface security. As was mentioned earlier, there are a lot of controls in 197. We will not be able to go through all these controls for the sake of time. So what we do is we pick some key domains, and then for each of the domains, we look at some critical controls, controls that specifically apply to end users like you and I, so we would know how to implement or the type of controls that we can implement within our environment. So for application and then interface security, there are 7 controls, and then all 7 controls for the infrastructure as a service deployment model are a shared responsibility. And then for platform as a service use case, all controls are shared. Now let's look at the first control, which speaks to policies and then procedures. And then this is very consistent throughout this document. For every first control in each domain, it speaks to policies and then procedures. So the first control here states that you should establish and then document approved policies and procedures for application security. Now, this control is a shared responsibility for a software as a service deployment, because you as the end user will have to come up with your own policies that you would need with regards to the usage of that service. And then from the cloud service providers' point of view too, they also have to get policies that will guide their development of such applications for their end users. But as I indicated, we'll be looking at more of the controls that sit with the clients, that is the end user. Now, the next control we look at is control 4, which talks about secure development. So it is basically stated that you define and develop a software development lifecycle in accordance with policies defined by the organization. So, all the controls are pointing or are originating from the policies that have already been spoken about in the first control. And then this control is a shared responsibility for infrastructure as a service and then platform as a service, but it's solely sits with the cloud service provider for software as a service, considering the fact that if you are using a system or an application, or you are using a cloud service as a software as a software as a service deployment model, you don't have to really worry about how the application came about. Yours is just to come in with your data and then use it. The fifth control under this domain speaks to automated application security testing. Now, the control states that implement a testing strategy, including criteria for accepting new information systems, upgrades, and versions. And then it also states that you automate where possible. Now, when it comes to automation, it's always a bit tricky because in automating, there are two sides, let's say three sides to it. People who get it right. But in one case, we get people over automating. As such, they are not really able to meet the objective of what they would want to achieve. And then in some instances too, some end users will under automate. So based on your use case, you actually find a balance and then automate the right amount of services or processes to be able to help you in delivering your service. And then this particular control is a shared responsibility for IAS and then PAS. Now we move to the next domain, which is audit and assurance. So there are six controls here, which looks at controls around independent risk-based assessments, compliance, auditing, audit management, and then remediation. All controls in this domain are shared responsibilities for all the three deployment models. So there should never be a case where you can be like, okay, so I'm using this cloud service this cloud service, especially for the software as a service deployment. There is always control that you are supposed to put or implement at your end. You shouldn't have that false sense of security where you would think that somebody is responsible for implementing those security controls. It doesn't happen like that. You also have to put in some controls in your environment. So here, that is where we can come in as an independent party to help you assess your cloud environment, to identify and then help provide mitigating controls and the remediation to any identified risks that came up during this risk assessment. And then we are always available. You can reach out after this call for us to have a call on how we can help you secure your cloud environment and then achieve compliance. So the first control we will look here is on requirement compliance. So the control state that you verify compliance of your cloud use case with relevant standards, regulatory and statutory requirements. So we know every industry is being regulated now. And then for these industries, they ensure compliance. So if you are going to adopt the cloud technology, you'd have to know the industry that you fall with, the type of regulatory requirements or statutory requirements that you are supposed to achieve. Then you design your controls to be able to meet those requirements. So it is also worth noting that this is not a one-time activity, such that probably on your first year of adopting the cloud, you do such an assessment and then you say, okay, you are compliant, and then that is it. It is a continuous process because the cloud environment is very fluid. You can easily add on new services day in, day out, provisioning access, creating new roles. So this should be a continuous process. So it is actually best you have an internal control, a compliance unit, or your internal audit team can even come in to be doing these regular checks. Or based on your use case, you can even bring in external auditors to be doing this checks and then assessments for you. And then if for nothing at all, at least once a year, you should have this compliance checks conducted. Or when there has been a major change in your cloud environment, like rolling on a new service or moving into another cloud environment where you are deploying a multi-cloud tenancy. Now, another control you look under audits and then assurance domain is the audit management process. So here it states that you define and implement an audit management process which will cover audit planning, risk analysis, security control assessments, conclusions, remediation schedules, report generation and review of past reports and supporting evidence. So as auditors, our work don't only end when we conduct the assessments, do our testings, and then we issue reports. We actually have to ensure that remediation steps are put in place. So it is not enough to conduct these assessments. You actually have to put in plans to remediate them and also ensure that they are actually, the remediation is actually completed. So this leads to the next control, which speaks to remediation. So there is actually one control that speaks to remediation under audits and then assurance, that is control 6. And it states that you should establish and maintain a risk-based corrective action plan to remediate audit findings, review and report remediation status to relevant stakeholders. So this is very key to every audit process. And also, I think Edith mentioned earlier about SOC reports, the various types of SOC reports. So the cloud service providers on their own have put in controls to ensure that whatever service they are providing to you are being guided by the rights or are being provided in the right control environment. So they contract independent auditors to come in and then do an assessment of their environment. And then they usually release this report in the SOC, that's the Service Organization Controls reports. And then these reports are readily available. So if you would want to adopt any cloud solution, it's the onus falls on you to actually review this SOC reports and then see if there are any identified gaps or control weaknesses, and then whether they've been remediated. And then if you think you are, or those risks, if any, falls within your risk appetite, you can go into it. So before you adopt any cloud service, it is recommended that you review this report to see that the right controls are put in place. That is from the cloud service providers' points of view, because you wouldn't want to have situations where your data or your infrastructure will be exposed to the wrong people as a result of negligence from the side of the cloud service provider. So it's always recommended we review this service organization reports. Now we move to the next domain, which is on business continuity. Business continuity management and then operational resilience. So there are 11 controls in total here. 9 of these controls are shared responsibilities for all the 3 deployment models, and then the other 3 are solely the CSP owned. CSP is the cloud service provider. And then these are the disaster response plan, the disaster plan exercise, that's testing your disaster recovery plan, and then also equipment redundancy. And this is quite clear because for cloud, in a cloud environment, you as the end user or the clients do not own the physical infrastructure. That is the property of the cloud service provider. So they have to ensure that this controls are put in place and then tested, and all this can be found in the SOC reports that are provided. So we look at the first control that we would want to discuss, and then that is control 2, which speaks to risk assessment and then impact analysis. So you determine the impact of business disruptions to establish criteria for developing business continuity and operational resilience strategies and then capabilities. So like we discussed under the audit and assurance, once you've conducted your risk assessment and then your business impact analysis, you would be able to know the controls to put in place to ensure that your business, you're able to sustain your business, even in the case of any misfortunate occurrences. So this takes us to the next one, which is a build up on this. That's control 6 under business continuity and operational resilience, which is the business continuity exercise. So the control states that you have to exercise and test your business continuity and operational resilience plan at least annually or upon significant changes. So yes, within the cloud environment too, you are supposed to develop a business continuity plan Business continuity plans are not only meant for your on-prem infrastructure. In the cloud too, you are supposed to have a business continuity plan, and then this should be tested at least annually or upon significant changes to your environment. Now, the next control we will look at here is on backups. I mean, this is a topic that I'm sure we are all aware of. And then it is best practice that we periodically back up our data in the cloud. But one part of the control, the last part of the control, is something that we don't really get people doing. That is by periodically testing these backup data to see if you can rely on them when there need be. So this will help to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and then availability of the data. So you don't only back up and then keep it somewhere and then expect that when you need it, you get it. You actually have to test it. You actually have to test for the readability of these backup files. So this is actually a very critical control that you have to ensure that you have implemented in your cloud environment, because you wouldn't want the situation whereby as a result of a downtime, which rarely happens in cloud environments, you will be found hanging because probably you've not put in controls as in deploying your infrastructure in more than one availability zone, or in the best scenarios in deploying them in multiple regions. So that will be it for business continuity, and then business continuity management, and then operational resilience. So we move to the change control and configuration management domain. Now we have 9 controls here, and all these controls are shared responsibilities for PaaS, platform as a service, and then software as a service. But for when we come to the infrastructure as a service model, there are sales controls which are shared, and then the other 3 are the CSP's responsibility. Now, the first control that we want to look at here is with regards to quality testing. That is control 2. It states that follow a defined quality change control, approval and testing process with established baselines, testing and release standards. So basically what this is telling us is that before you can implement any change within your cloud environment, you should have already defined a threshold or a baseline that every service or every upgrade you would want to move to production would have to meet. And then these are standards that you would have to develop based on your environment and then your risk appetite. So if let's say company A is using threshold A, it doesn't necessarily mean you also have to follow that threshold, because then it might even be different regulatory requirements. So you actually consider all these in developing these baselines, and then ensuring that all changes meet these baselines before they are released into your production environment. Now, still on change management and configuration management, Control 3 speaks on change management technology, and it states that manage the risk associated with applying changes to organizational assets, including application, system infrastructure, and configuration. Now, the risk management process should be ensured regardless of who manages the assets. So there are some assets that will sit with you internally. Your internal team will be handling that, and then some that has been outsourced to external parties. Now, all this has to be managed, the risk associated with them. I know there are third-party risk management tools out there that you can use to manage your risk, and then Deloitte also has a proprietary third-party management risk tool, which I mean, if you would want to consider that option, you can contact us after this session, and then we will pick it up from there. So this control is actually a shared responsibility for all 3 deployment models. So once again, you can't have that false sense of security or compliance and be like, okay, this is something that my cloud service provider is supposed to implement. No, you also have a role to play in that. Now, the next control and then the last standard the change management domain that we look at is unauthorized change protection. So the control states that restricts the unauthorized addition, removal, updates, and management of organizational assets. Now, this can only be achieved when you put in controls to limit access to your production environment, as well as ensuring segregation of duties. So in this case, we shouldn't have a situation whereby someone can start a development process and then see it through to deployment into the live environment without a third eye coming in to verify whatever work was done. These are basic controls that have to be put in place. And then, as I said, the cloud environment is very fluid. Now we have a lot of automations going on. So in the whole change process, we have this a lot of automations like the CI/CD pipelines, where once you commit a code to a repository, it will automatically do its own testing and then push it to production. So basically, you have to ensure that the automated test cases have to be resilient. And then also, before the code can be pushed to the repository for it to be picked up, I mean, there should be someone, it could even be a peer review. Another member of the development team can take a look at it before it is finally accepted in the repository. So these are common controls that exist, but we most often than not neglect them, sometimes because we would want to ensure that our services are moved with speed and then on time to production. Now we move to the next control on cryptography, encryption, and then key management. This has a lot of controls. Actually, there are 21 of them. And then all of them are shared for all the 3 deployment models. So you actually have a role to play in your key management services. So this domain covers areas of roles and responsibilities, encryption algorithm, key creation, rotation, distraction, amongst others. There are lots of actually under this control. And then it also covers key inventory. I mean, you will not be able to secure something that you don't know. If you don't know this particular asset exists, how would you even be able to secure it? So this takes us to the first control under cryptography, encryption, and key management that we'll be looking at, which is on roles and responsibility. The control states that we should define and implement cryptographic, encryption, and key management roles and then responsibilities. So there should be defined owners for every encryption key that exists in your cloud environment. Now, what most clients will usually do is they will have an admin group that manages that's the super users within their cloud environments. And then in most cases, there are a lot of people within that admin group handling various issues. And then this environment, this admin group will have access to manage these keys. It is a bit risky because once you have a lot of people managing it, though you can put in controls to measure who does what, but you should be able to streamline it to give these controls of managing these keys to specific people within your admin groups. And then identity and access management has made it very simple to be able to break down access to very granular levels. Now, the next one that we look at is on encryption and then key management audits. So you would have to as well be auditing these encryption keys, because this is very key. This is protecting your environment. So there has to be a frequent audit of whatever is being done in that space. Now, the last control we discuss under the cryptography, encryption, and key management is on key rotation. Now, for every key, there has to be a crypto period. A crypto period is the time that should be it should be defined in the key management policy. So a time that's a time period that the key will have to be rotated. And then this can vary from organization to organization based on their risk exposure or appetite. Now we move to data security and privacy lifecycle management. In this domain, there are 19 controls. 14 of them in this control are owned by the cloud service clients. So there is a lot when it comes to data security and privacy, a lot of controls sit with you as their client. So this is very key, and then it needs a lot of attention. So the controls speak to areas such as data classification, inventory, data retention, personal data processing, and then sensitive data transfer. So you have to define a data retention period, know how you handle and then process personal data. And then this is usually backed by regulatory and then industry requirements, which you would have to ensure that you adhere to, because there are serious repercussions to them if you are found to be doing otherwise. So this is actually an area that you would have to take control of. And then there are a lot of solutions out there that you can leverage to help you implement these controls. Now we move to another key domain, which is on governance, risk, and then compliance. So in this domain, there are 8 controls, and then 7 of them are shared responsibilities for all the 3 deployment models. And then like the audit and assurance, we saw that most of the controls are shared, so everyone has a role to play. So control 2 speaks on a risk management program, where you have to establish a risk management program that includes policies, procedures for identification, evaluation, ownership, treatment, and acceptance of cloud security and privacy risk. Every technology environment comes with its own risk. So you have to identify them, and then put in a program to be able to manage it based on your use case. Now we will move to another key domain that is on identity and then access management. This is a very common area, identity and access management. So within the CSA's cloud control matrix, there are system controls, which are all shared responsibilities for all the 3 deployment models. So within the IAM domain, the controls focuses on segregation of duties, the least privilege controls, user access reviews, and then password management, as well as uniquely identifiable users. So you have to put in such controls to be able to secure your environment. And then, it is under the identity and access management that you'll be able to secure. So that's like the gateway to your cloud environment. So these controls are very key. I would want us to just quickly take a look at 2 of the controls here, then we move on. So on user access review, so the control state that review your user access for least privilege and segregation of duties with a frequency that commensurates with organizational risk tolerance. So then again, your risk tolerance will determine the frequency that you will conduct this user access review. And then control 12 also speaks to safeguarding your logs. So you define and then implement and evaluate process and procedures to measure the logging infrastructure and then ensure that it is only read-only. And then it is only read-only. People can't go and then tamper with your logs. And then you should also define a break glass procedure where you would have to follow before writes or changes, modifications can be made to your logs. Now, talking of logs, I think it is only fair that we speak on the logging and then monitoring control, which will be the last domain that we will look at for this session. As we indicated, there are a lot of these controls, 17 domains and 197 controls in all. So we will not be able to go through. So let's quickly run through the logging and monitoring. So, there are 13 controls under this domain. And then the domain looks at controls around clock synchronization, log records, transaction activity logs, activity logs, and then log protection. And then within the cloud environments, I know a lot of this, in fact, all the service providers have provided solutions. Like in example, AWS, we have the CloudTrue and then CloudWatch, which you can use to monitor these logs in real time, and then they can actually be integrated into your various SIMs to be able to gather real time or give you a real time visibility of whatever is happening in your cloud environment. So as we've been repeating, there are a lot of this control. We will not be able to go through all of them, but based on your use case, if you are able to go through these controls holistically and then implement them within your cloud environment, it will reposition your organization in achieving compliance in the cloud and also secure your cloud environment without any false sense of security or compliance. So that will be all from my side. I will hand over back to Edith for her to run us through our service offerings within the risk advisory business. Over to you, Edith.
Thank you so much, Felix. I hope you have enjoyed our session. So the IT and Specialized Assurance Services is a subunit of the Risk Advisory Unit. We provide the following services to our numerous clients. The first one is the third-party assurance. What is a third-party assurance service? Now, this is a service we provide to clients to give them assurance over the design and operating effectiveness of the service organization's internal controls that they have. So this emanates from the fact that we go into the cloud service providers environment and check whether their controls within their environment are operating effectively, they've been designed well, and they've been implemented well. We do this and give you a report, which I mentioned earlier during our webinar, so we can give you a SOC 1 report or ISA 3402 report, a SOC 2 report, a SOC 2 plus report, or a SOC 3 report. What are some of the benefits that you can get from this? It gives you, the client, the comfort that your systems are being managed effectively, the controls are in place, that you are complying to regulatory requirements, you have a competitive advantage over other service organizations, and then there's no duplication of effort from your side. Now we look at risk assessment services. What do we mean by risk assessment services? So we come in to identify security risks within your organization and assess the threat that these risks pose to you. And then we ultimately give you a schedule of these security incidents and the compliance failures that they have. So we look at your risk identification, your risk measurement, your risk mitigation, and also the risk reporting. So we give you a comprehensive view of your security risks across your organization. And it also gives top management a concrete action plan for them to take in order to be able to mitigate these risks that are identified by us. We perform pre-implementation and post-implementation reviews. So with a pre-implementation, before you intend to deploy a new system, we come in and carry out an assessment to ensure that your organization is indeed ready for the deployment of this new system. And then for a post-implementation review, we actually evaluate whether the system's objectives that were identified earlier before the implementation have been fully achieved, and especially the problems that are identified during implementation have been satisfactorily solved. Systems implementation quality assurance is a full end-to-end review that we do right from the beginning of the implementation. So right from the requirement specification, going through the functional specification, the technical specification, going to the benefits realization. So we give you an end-to-end assurance that indeed your systems went through due process. The infrastructure is okay, the policies and procedures alongside are operating in a properly controlled environment. And we give you, most importantly, a value for your money. So you are able to relax, be safe, and assured that we will take care of that headache for you and notify you as and when things are not going according to what has been defined. for the information systems audits, we do both internal information systems audits and then external information systems audits. So we can come in to do an information systems audit for you, an IT audit for you. We look at your cyber and IT risk assessments for you. We look at your data center and network operations. We look at your information security. We look at your change management processes. We give you a report with identified gaps related to the internal control weaknesses within your environment, and also recommend steps you can take for you to be ensured that you are able to mitigate these weaknesses that we have identified. We can also build your IT capability for your team. So we can actually come in and then we support you, handhold them through the process so they can be able to deliver quality audits for you. And where you need an IT staff, we can quickly give you a staff from our department. We loan them to you for a period of time to fill in the gap that you have within your IT environment. So we give you a quick fix and a high rate of attrition. We also perform IT capability and maturity assessment, where we actually assess the clients' enterprise information technology processes in order to derive greater business benefits or greater value from what your IT is giving you. So there's a range between 1 and 5, 5 being the base and then 1 being the pinnacle. Whether your IT capability assessment has matured to level 1, that is the pinnacle. It means that all your controls defined are working effectively. The processes are in place. They've been designed well, they've been implemented, and they are being operating effectively. So these are the services for the IT and specialized assurance team. We have the cyber security team as well, who perform cyber strategies, vulnerability assessments, and penetration testing, and all other cyber needs that you may have. We have our governance and regulatory risk team that perform internal audits, also perform board evaluations. So if you need us to come through, we'll come through and do your board evaluations for you. Thank you so much for your time. And then we go back to Nanekia for the questions and answers session. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith. Thank you, Felix, for that presentation. We have a number of questions in our Q&A chat box. So for the benefit of everyone else on the call, we'll go into the Q&A section. Some of them have already been responded to. However, just so that everyone can have some information on the questions that were asked and then the responses that were given, and we'll go back into the Q&A. If you have any more questions, please feel free to type it in the Q&A chat box so we can read them out. So one of the questions from the participants. Okay, so someone wanted to know if these SOC reports from cloud vendors are the same as their attestation reports. I would let Edith answer that.
Thank you, Nana. So these SOC reports are the same as the attestation reports. So the SOC 1 report, SOC 2, SOC 2 plus, SOC 3 reports are all attestation reports that the cloud service provider provides to its end users. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Edith. Okay, so another question. So for a cloud user, can we say that the only sure bet assurance that the cloud service provider is, so for a cloud user, can we say that the only sure bet assurance is that the cloud service provider is complying with requirements in the SOC 2 report?
Okay, so Tanika, let me take that. So yes, it will depend on your use case of the cloud, but then again, because you don't have access to the physical infrastructure of the cloud environment, I guess that would be your best option. So that is why I mentioned in my presentation earlier that it is not enough to just cite the reports, but you have to review them to see any identified gaps. that were identified by these independent assessors. So yes, because you don't have physical access to the infrastructure, your best bet will be the report. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Felix. Okay, so we have also, depending on the type of cloud service offering a client adopts, do all controls mentioned in the webinar, are they applicable, whether it's platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, or software as a service?
Okay, so on that, when you get hold of the CCM document, it actually drills down to tell you for each particular control the deployment type that applies to it. So be it PAS, be it IAS or SAS, and then even goes down to tell you the organizational units within your organization that's is responsible, or that should be responsible to spearhead the implementation of that control. So once you get hold of that document, it's actually been broken down. So that's why, as part of the objectives, it was stated earlier by Audit that they want to make it very clear and then understandable to everyone who comes across it. Yeah.
Okay, Felix, I'll have to ask you to hold on for this question as well. So someone wanted to know what's the role of information security, the information security function. What role does it have with regards to complying with cloud security, cloud computing?
Okay, so I would want to go back to my presentation. So in the presentation slides, there are actually areas where you see the organizational structure. So for each control, it actually states the various units which are responsible for that. Okay, because we wanted to make the slides presentable, and then it's a very bulk document, so we kind of compress them. But then again, it depends on organizations and then how they coin their units and then the mandates they give them. But surely information security units or departments have a major role to play in ensuring compliance within the cloud environment. So once you're able to lay hold of the documents, you should be able to see the specific units. And then that's, let me put this out there, that it is not cast in stone that it should necessarily be those that has been listed. You know, we have different environments and then how they, even as little as their nomenclature for their unit. So yes, information security units have a major role to play in that.
Okay, thank you very much, Felix, for that. We still have a number of questions in the Q&A chat box. So someone wants to know, for our external IT audit services, which certification body are we aligned with? Is Deloitte aligned?
Thank you, Nana, for the question. So we are aligned. We have our own proprietary methodology that we use and framework that we use, but we are aligned with ISO. We are aligned with COBIT as well. We are aligned with PCI DSS. So it actually depends. We are aligned with all the standards, most of the standards. So it actually depends for IT audit, depending on the particular client and the client environment. We look at the certification body that best applies, and then we test the controls based on best practices. Thank you.
Nanekia, let me just quickly add to that. I think from a Deloitte perspective, we have an integrated compliance standard, which helps our clients in going through the compliance level with some of the standards to ensure that, just like Edith said, there is that interdependencies. The reason for that is that depending on the standard in which the client wants to comply with, and more so the requirement from other maybe key players that they may be having relationship with, we try, the standard that we have is integrated that considered all the requirements across the major standard, COBIT, ISO, PCI, and the likes, so that when we go through the process, to a large extent, we help our client to ensure that at the minimum, they comply with beyond just a standard to about 2 to 3 standards, so that depending, like I said, the responsibilities that withhold the client from a third party, they are ensured that, yes, to a large extent, they are beyond basic in compliance across the multi-standards. So that is how we operate. Thank you.
Thank you, Kofi. So we have other questions that sort of speak to the slides. The slides will be shared after the webinar. So I think that should answer a number of the questions that we have in there. So there's another question from Daniel Dodu. He wants to know, for cryptographic key rotation and encryption, does Deloitte advise on specific or industry-proven secret management tools to meet given standards?
So, hello, Daniel. Thank you for your question. From our point of view, we will not be able to give, let's say, a generic period that you would have to rotate your keys. I think during the presentation, I mentioned that it will be based on your risk assessments, the risk appetite, and then even regulatory requirements. So in some jurisdiction, you have regulations on how long you can keep a key, or it will actually tell you how often you should rotate these keys. So we would not be able to give a specific period that you should, but it will mainly depend on the type of service that key is being used for. So you wouldn't expect a key being used for, let's say, personal data encryption to be the same as a key being used for, I wouldn't know, but I mean, it basically depends on the type of service that you are using that for. So we'll not be able to give a specific answer to that. Thank you, Daniel.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Phil. Daniel, I hope your question is answered. We still have a bit of time. So if you still have any questions that you want to ask the panelists, you are invited to do so. In the meantime, I believe our technical team would share the link to the survey that I mentioned earlier, so you can give us feedback on how we did during the webinar to help us improve upon our webinars going forward.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello, Elvis, are you speaking?
Yeah, good morning again, and thanks for the presentation. I have a question on the business continuity management plan. So here, the cloud provider, we have been made aware that we shouldn't rely on the SOC report only. How are we going to ensure that when they are undertaking their BCM plan, I mean, it is well done. I mean, it is well followed through. Thank you.
Okay, so Nanika, let me quickly take that.
Okay.
So it depends on the service level that you have with a third party in terms of the service provider. And one of the things that we encourage our clients as a firm is that at the point of contracting, you must ensure that the contracting terms and conditions are critical for you to ensure that, yes, you can rely on some of the controls, that assurance that you'll be getting from a third party. So for example, it is critical that as part of your contracting requirement that you would like a third party to review, for example, those critical control requirements or metrics from time to time, and the report is given to you. Now, when the report is given to you as a third party, because the onus is on you as an organization, and the obligation from a third party independent reviewer perspective is to you, to ensure that they provide you with the technical information as to the maturity of the control environment, the weaknesses, and the recommendations that are required, that have been provided. Now, it is also incumbent on you, the client, to ensure that there is a follow-up, either internally using your own internal IT audit team or your internal audit team to follow up to ensure that the report that had been received, the follow-on activities that is expected of the service provider had been done and has been done properly. It is critical. Now, to the extent that the service provider will want to see what value, for example, are you a significant client to them? So those level of risk will be considered. What is the risk category of in terms of the service they are providing to you versus subjecting themselves to those levels of third-party assurances. So I think for us on our part, those are the ways in which you could try as much as you can to keep an eye beyond just the report, but going further steps to say, how have you remediated the actions or the gaps that were identified? And can we get an assurance that indeed they've been done effectively and adequately? So those are the ways in which you can provide those level of assurance. I hope that answers your question.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kofi, for the response. Are there any more questions from anyone? Okay, so if you look on your screens, we are sharing the QR code for the survey. You can scan that and rate us in terms of the webinar, how we did, what you think we should improve upon, and any other comments that you have for us. We really appreciate your time joining us today to have this insightful webinar. Okay, still no more questions.
Hello?
And yes.
Yeah, I just, good morning once again. Maybe this is the last one. I just thought about the ISO standard for cloud computing. How does that align with this matrix? You know, there's an ISO standard for cloud computing. If my memory serves me rightly, 2017. Yeah.
Yes.
So if somebody's practicing that standard, how different is it from this matrix?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. So, yes, I think Edith mentioned from the word go that the version 4 of the CCM, CSA CCM, is actually encompasses a lot of these standards. So it is not a standalone framework. So if you are using the ISO standards for cloud, I mean, that is equally a good one. And for general IT environment, there are a lot of frameworks out there that you as the end user would have to choose from which one you would want to align. But then again, what makes this one very comprehensive is it brings together other control frameworks as well. Okay, so we have a bit of ISO, a bit of PCI DSS, NIST, CIS, and then knowledge from the version 3 of the CCM as well. So I think that also works fine. It just depends on which framework you would want to align with. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, very well. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, are there any more questions? Okay. So I'm going to assume we don't have any more questions. Getting thumbs up to indicate that we've done a good job. Thank you. So thank you once again for joining this webinar, and thanks for being an amazing audience. We hope to see you in our future webinars. Please do not forget to scan the QR code on your screen so that you provide us with feedback to be able to serve you better. Thank you once again. and do have a great day the rest of the week.